Hey ho everybody. We are going to today, I'm going to do a quick tutorial on how I apply a cardstock design to a tumbler. It's a pretty simple process, I feel. But mine might be a little bit different. The way I do it might be a little bit different than some other folks. And so I'm just going to put up a quick video here for how I do it because I think it's pretty quick. And when my time is my money, I like what I do to not only be cost efficient, but time efficient as well. And so whatever I can do to speed up the process, yet kick out a fully functional and durable product, that's what I'm gonna do. So what I'm going to start off with today is my 12 by 12 sheet of cardstock. I've got a 20-ounce hogg skinny tumbler. I've got my UV resin by Decorum. I get this on Amazon. I purchased the 500 gram size. I'm sure they've got smaller bottles, but I use a lot of UV resin for just a lot of different things, so I typically buy in bulk. I found if you get 2 or more, you get 10% off at times. They offer coupons. So currently I've got like 3 or 4 of these sitting around. This is a low odor resin. I do enjoy it because there's several UV resins out there that smell pretty bad, and this doesn't. And if you've watched any of my other tutorials, this is my go-to. So it's just UV resin by Decorum. It dries nice and clear and hard. It is transparent, quick curing, toxic free, low odor. It doesn't say that on here, but it is low odor. If you're going to use it in molds, great. I suggest using thin layers. UV resin, once you do heat it up with your light, tends to warp. The brand of UV light I'm using here is a Dulux. It comes with a battery inside that is rechargeable. The nice thing about it is I'm not constantly running to the store to buy AA or AAA batteries. On the days where I've used it a lot, I just take that battery out, plug it in, and then let it charge overnight. Come next morning when I'm ready to use it, it's here, it's available. The final thing we're gonna have is super glue and nail file or sanding block. I prefer the nail files. I got fine coarse, medium, or fine, and then medium coarseness. And what I'm gonna start off by doing here is just essentially sanding the seam. The seam is going to be where my ends of my paper meet. I'm sure there are templates where you could pre-cut your paper and have it ready to just match up. It just lines up perfectly on your cup, and go ahead and go that route if you've got that template. I choose to wing it. It's simple for me, relatively basic, and so that's just the way I work. To each their own. So if you've got a template and you would like to pre-cut your paper, absolutely have at it. Go for it. Go to town. So at this point in time, take the camera off me and we're gonna put it down on the cup, the paper, and everything that we're doing, so that you can see how I roll. I lay my tumbler down, sanded seam side up. I want my seam to be straight on the cup. I don't want it going wonky at all diagonal. So when that cup sits up, that line is going to be straight. Is my design going to match up? Nope. Just because it's a printed floral design. And that's okay, because I will cover the seam with either some washi tape or nail tape or something. There will be something on there that I use to hide this seam. I do not do a base coat. It's kind of redundant on this design. There's nothing gonna show through. The bottom of the cup will be left open, so you can either cut a circle out of your design and adhere that to the bottom. I personally like to glitter the bottom of my cup, and then I put down my contact information, who it's by. That's how I brand my cups. So what I'm going to start off with is my super glue. You can use any brand. I like the Gorilla Quickset Gel. It comes with a green lid. You can get it anywhere. And I am going to just do a little dab over and over down the length of the cup. This is going to hold my paper on. It's a straight line, so it's going to help me know that I'm getting my paper on straight the way I want it. And I'm going to run that down the length of the cup. Press it. Let it get a good stick. You want to be careful to not get your fingers in it. You're going to have all sorts of skin and ugly super glue marks on your paper if you're not cautious about how you're applying. And just keep running that down, getting it as smooth and stuck as you possibly can. So there's that is stuck to the cup. Seam is straight. Next thing I'm going to do now is take the cup, roll the paper around it. I'm going to start to pull my paper nice and tight. I don't want it bubbling up. And I roll it back so that I can see the seam here. And I'm going to adhere that to where that super glue is starting to poke out a little bit. I'm just going to let it hold in place. It will attach. It will stick. And once it's stuck, then I'm going to fold my paper back a little bit more taut. There, see? Now we're stuck on there. It's not quite as tight as I'd like, so I'm going to pull that back around one more time. And I'm going to just press. There. And again, roll it back. And press just right on that seam. You'll be able to feel your glue and your paper underneath. So just massage that on there, get a good stick, and then roll your paper back so that your lines match up. This is important because this is how you're going to know where to cut your cardstock. Next, I just get out my little X-Acto blade or razor blade, whatever you want to call it, and I'm just going to follow this crease I have made down the length of my cup. All right, so there the excess is removed. Paper is on. It is not fully attached yet. So as you can see, as I'm peeling up, some of that cup there is shining through or showing through. So I'm going to just dabble on some more glue. Again, trying to ensure that it's not going to be all over the outside of the paper in a mess. I don't want it to be messy. I don't want this out here all drying white and crusty. And I secure. Run your finger on it. Get a good stick. I don't trust super glue with everything. It is not a permanent solution. So once the super glue work here is done, once we've got the super glue done, this is where that's where our UV resin will come into play. So once this is good and dried and I feel I'm tacked down, I'm going to feel for the edge of my cup. At which point I'm going to stick in my blade and I am just going to follow the rim of my cup. Where you get a nice straight line. That rim keeps you from going too far. Same thing on the bottom side. Bend my paper just a little bit so I can see kind of where the bottom of my cup is. And I let my razor blade just press firmly against the base of the cup. This does work best with a super sharp blade, so I'd recommend, you know, have a blade that you use simply for this. And your paper will not tear. You'll have just nice, clean edges. So, there is the cup now wrapped in our floral design. But as you can see, I've got a little bit of a lip here. I've got a little bit of an edge, if you will, that I don't like there. It's going to make it really hard to get a nice smooth layer of resin over top of this. So I'm going to put my cup around. And it looks like maybe I have come unattached a little bit down here. As you can see, there's a little gap in there. So I'm just going to shoot a skosh of super glue up in there. And then I'm going to press and hold. I want that to tack down. I want everything held down as nice and firm as I can possibly get it. Now, with this lip that's here, not sure if you can see that from there, but with that lip, I'm going to turn, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to set it so that I can use my right hand to get under that ledge. And I am simply going to drag my blade to try to pick up any excess overhang there. Now at this part you do want to be cautious that you don't press too hard. Reason being that if you do press too hard, you'll do exactly what I just did. I dug in to the design a little bit. There's now a white spot. That's not anything that's going to stand out and cause me any problems, so I'm going to just overlook it for now. We'll label this as my tutorial cup, so it's allowed to be a little flawed. My line's not perfectly straight. That's fine by me. As I said, I will take and use some tape, some washi tape. Not sure what color we'll do yet, but by the time I lay that on there, that rough, imperfect edge will be hidden. So just keep it straight enough that you can hide it with tape and you're good to go. Now my UV resin comes into play. Again, just because I want my seam to be as flawless and stuck as humanly possible, I'm going to take my UV resin and I'm going to lay it down right on that seam. You don't want a whole lot. It's going to try to run and drip everywhere if you put too much on there. You can glove your hand, you can bare finger it, the choice is yours. I choose bare fingers when working with UV. I like to touch, I like to feel, I like to know what the ledges are or edges are, and with gloves it gets a little bit hard to do. I run my UV light over the resin that I've just laid down to cure it. it will get hard. The higher quality light you have, and they are measured by NMs, which is, I can't even remember. Someone had told me once. But this torch is 405 NMs, and I believe that's one of the highest wattages that you can get for a UV handheld flashlight. That's nice. It's a little slimy, but it's not tacky. So I'm gonna take it and roll with it. It's about the perfect texture for me. You can see I'm still just a little bit rough in a few areas, especially back here. You can really see it on the camera. So I'm gonna lay it back down. I'm going to go over it again. Again, just laying down a bead of UV right on that seam and smooth it out. I have been asked multiple times, can you use UV on a whole tumbler? Yes, it is tricky. You would have to have, I would use several lights, and you're gonna want it spinning and curing as you go. Downfall is UV resin tends to shrink as you put it on a cup. So if you're going to UV something, if you're in a hurry and you choose to use the UV resin, have at it. Just understand you probably will not have a completely smooth cup. You're gonna have to go over it with your regular epoxy, your 2-part epoxy. I use actually several different kinds. I use either Alumilite, Envirotex, Faux Rizzle is kind of my go-to. It's a nice thick consistency. It's really great at sticking to the edges of the cups where you've got the glitter, so it eliminates a lot of those rough edges because it just really clings. It's a nice, like I said, just thick consistency. And so while I do some of my underwork here with UV, the rest of this cup will be done with 2-part epoxy, and I will most likely be utilizing Faux Rizzle. All right, and so that is done. It is stuck. It is, I'm gonna go through and just sand off any rough edges I have. This is where I like my nail files. I can get real spot specific. I can hone in a certain spot and not like this. The sanding block, it's so wide and so bulky, it would probably chew up some of my paper. And I don't want to mess with the design. I don't want to rub off any of the pattern that's here. So I just use my nail file, and it just gets that spot. As you can see, it's overall really smooth. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to seal the base of my cup. As you can see, you can see the paper. You want to fill in that gap. In my mind, it's important to do that. If your epoxy starts leaking up in there, your regular epoxy, it's going to bubble. You're going to get a lot of air bubbles that come out of there, and nobody likes air bubbles. They create just problems. Bubbles are problems when making a cup. So here is what I do. I run my UV around that seam of cup and paper, cup and cardstock. Smooth it out. Let it run up in there, get on the edges, and cure. I just went around the rim where the cardstock meets the cup, and I press it nice and firm as I'm going around. Trying to promote as good of a bond and seal as I can possibly get out of this thing. Just rotating and filling. And then I'm going to do it again. Use my finger, go in, fill it in. You want to try to minimize any running you might have over that edge, just because you do want your cardstock to be as smooth as possible. And if it starts getting drips over the edge of the cup, it's going to be rougher than most of us like. And same thing, just cure. And I am set up for the most part. Hit a couple spots on this side, but over here I am good to go. I am okay. So now it's a little rough here. I'm gonna use my nail file again. And I'm gonna go in towards the base of the cup, or in towards the center of the cup. And I'm going to just smooth down any rough edges I might have. You'll notice it's a little oily up in there. You can see where that UV resin is. So just to be cautious, I'm going to come through here and I'm going to hit it where you can see that it got moist, where that UV resin sank down. I'm only doing this not so much as a purpose for sealing it, but if you have anything that's not hardened, not cured underneath your regular epoxy, it's one more moist component underneath hardened epoxy that's going to keep your normal 2-part epoxy from setting up. So UV is best on a clear, like if you're gonna use it for molds, clear molds, anything transparent, because this light needs to be able to penetrate. So it's not gonna really, you're gonna have to hit it close. On here, I'm going through black paper onto a stainless cup. So you definitely wanna make sure you're holding it on there for some time, allowing that light to fully penetrate through the paper and to bounce off that stainless cup that's beneath. So our bottom is done, it's attached, cup sits nice and flat, it's not wonky, it doesn't teeter. When your customer sits it down, it's gonna sit there, it's gonna sit good. Now we are going to come to the top rim and do the same thing. There's a gap there, we wanna fill that. We wanna ensure that when we go through and put on our 2-part epoxy, that this is filled in and there are no air bubbles to get out or that can escape. So again, I'm just going to run a bead, get it in between the paper and the tumbler. That is my main goal. I'm going to get some drippage down the inside, or clear down on the inside. I can clean that up afterwards. Smooth the paper. And I did get a drop clear down there in the base, just because I don't want that to get hard down there. I'm going to go in there with my towel, and I'm just going to clean that up real quick. Once it's hard, it may be a completely different kind of beast to get out of the base of the cup. And I'm going to press the edges of the paper firmly against the cup and hit it with my UV torch. And as you're pressing your cardstock against the cup, you will notice that there, in some areas, some of your UV resin may bubble up around the lip. That's good. You want that to come up. You want it nice and attached. So once you see that UV resin coming up and you're curing it, you know you're getting a good bond here. The top edge of my rims of my cup, I usually end up going around probably 2 or 3 times with my UV, just to ensure that I've got a good attachment or a good connection there. In fact, here, let's see if I can't just, I'm going to take my little tiny cup, I'm going to squirt some on here, and I'm going to do the rest with my finger. And I shake, so getting that on there with the bottle is sometimes just a challenge. I'm just going to lay it there on that seam, and here I just kind of start spot working. Just filling in that gap between the cup and the paper. You can see right there, there's that pesky gap, and it's gonna be there. So you just want to get something in it so that it doesn't fill up with epoxy, it doesn't release a whole bunch of air bubbles, and you can still get a nice smooth finish on the lips of your cup. You want this to soak down into the cracks, into the grease, so when your client goes to wash it and they're drinking out of it, the cardstock will not fill up with paper, with water. You need this sealed as good as you would vinyl, glitter, water slide. So filling that gap with a good hard substance and UV is the best route to go, in my experience. And just keep going around, filling and curing. And until you can see that that gap there between the cup and the paper is completely full, and it's really hard to see on the camera right now, and I get that, but once you start doing this, you will see the gap I'm talking about. Cardstock is just so firm, it's so thick, and there will be a gap in between your cup and your cardstock. So until that gap is completely filled, you've got no little holes, no little openings. You just keep going around with your UV. Fill all those holes and just fill it so that way you can make sure nothing else is going to get in there. We are going to take a razor blade to the end of this and smooth off all of this extra epoxy that we've got on there, all the UV resin we've got on there. So don't worry about it being, I mean, that's not level. As you can see, it's lumpy. it's not smooth. It doesn't need to be smooth right now. All we're focusing on doing is filling the gap between the cardstock and the cup. My gap is filled, so I am just going to run my UV over it one more time, holding it a little bit longer in each place, just a slow rotation around. And give that UV a chance to be fully cured. Okay, I'm cured. I'm good to go. So I'm gonna take my straight razor, and now, without cutting my hand off, I'm going to just follow the lip of that cup and remove all that excess UV off of the rim of the cup. For some of you, may be easier to just use your X-Acto. A little less chance of hacking your finger off there. And this stuff does dry super hard. It is very easy to just slip with your blade or with your X-Acto knife and remove a finger, so you want to be very careful. You also want to be careful that you don't pull too hard and do what I just did. It will rip your paper. We can fix that. I'm not going to get too concerned about it. I've been working with UV enough that I'm not going to get too worked up, but I will show you how we fix that tear here in just a minute. And hack your finger open. So again, just be careful. Blades are sharp. Okay, I'm going to lay down that tear so that it's nice and smooth. And I'm going to go in with my UV, go slightly underneath it, fill that in, lay it flat, and cure. Just get it restuck. It's a really simple fix, but if you can avoid from having to fix it, then you should obviously do so. If you find you can't always hide it perfectly, if it's not something that disappears as well as that one does, lay a rim of washi tape around the rim of your cup and you're good to go. It's overall hidden. I'm going to go over this just one more time. Finger, light. All right, and now as you can see, there's no gap between the cup and the paper. It is completely filled in with UV resin at this point. So that part is finished. Cardstock has been fully applied. It's a 360-degree wrap right now. It's essentially the same thing as a water slide. However, you get to skip the paint. You get to skip the sealing of anything. You don't need to seal it. Some people may opt to go over the whole cup with UV when you're done, just to get that all over seal. I found that it's not necessary. I have attempted to do that a time or two, but I've quit. My next step will be to measure out my 2-part epoxy, and we'll go ahead and do that here in just a minute. But I'll measure out my 2-part epoxy, and the next thing I will do is just a full coverage coat on the cup. Once I get that full coverage epoxy on there, then I will work on the bottom. I will use my UV resin, and I will glitter the bottom of the cup, and that'll be an entirely different video. Just because it's gonna take a minute for my regular two-part, my faux rizzle. It's gonna take, you know, 8 hours for that to cure before I can mess with it. So I'm gonna get my measuring cup out, and I'm gonna go heavy. At this point, we've bypassed the glitter, we've bypassed the first coat of epoxy, so I am going to measure out 1/2 of a fluid ounce of Part A, or 1/4 of a fluid ounce of Part A, and 1/4 fluid ounce of Part B, giving me a 1/2 fluid ounce total of resin that I'm working with. And stir. My design, as you can tell, it's black. So, I mean, there is some color in here, but working with anything that's got this much black on it, you want to do everything that you can to minimize the air bubbles that are going to be into your epoxy. So a slow stir. Do not pull your stick in and out, whatever you're using to stir, whether it be a popsicle stick or a legit stir stick. I have one somewhere right here. Whatever it is you're using to stir your resin, don't do a lot of lifting. Don't stir like your cake batter. Don't whip it. You just want it mixed, minimal air bubbles, so stir nice and slow. Scrape the bottom, scrape the edges, and then let it sit. Let them air bubbles come to the top. You might want to hit it with your heat gun a couple of times, make it nice and warm so that them air bubbles can come out just that much easier. I am here in Nebraska. We just got buried with a foot of snow last week, like 15 inches. So we deal with the cold climates down here. I try to keep my bitch barn relatively warm. It works best, you know, obviously if you're keeping it around 70, 72 degrees, your epoxy is usually generally very happy. I mean, you know you've got it the right temp when it's essentially really clear. When you get a cloudy or it's, you know, hard to see through, you know your epoxy is too cool. You should, you know, get out your heat gun, get out your candle warmer, whatever you do to warm your epoxy so that it's ready to use. So now, while I let my air bubbles kind of rise out of my epoxy, I'm going to get my cup ready to go onto the turner. I do like the Dollar Tree footballs. I also like the pool noodles. So the choice is yours. Whatever gets your cup on your turner nice and straight, just go with that. That's your primary end game, is to just make sure your cup is nice and straight. Go ahead and just stick this on. I've got multiple turners. I've got a 20 cup turner over there, a 6 cup turner here, and a 6 cup turner here, and then I've got another 5 cup turner over here that has an attachment that holds my bullets. So when I lift you up, you're gonna see a wide array of a huge mess, and you're just gonna have to bear with me because there are cup turners literally all over this place. Stick it on this one for now. Find out which one of these will turn this turner on. And there we go. Get out my glove. And since my cave is relatively warm starting off, my epoxy is already mixed up really nice. It came out nice and clear already. So there's really not any need for it to sit and I don't know what you want to call it, mixify for, you know, 5-7 minutes, or even 3 to 5. When it's this warm in here, I mix it, make sure it's nice and clear. I don't have any swirlies. I can't see that it's still, you know, chemically reacting part A to part B. And then I'm just going to go ahead and apply. Once you lay this on, your cardstock will soak it up. So where you had that oily texture on there from your UV resin, your cardstock will soak it up. It will all eventually blend in, and it will all eventually look the same. So don't panic. You just gotta wait just a skosh for your cardstock to absorb this UV that, or this regular epoxy that we're putting on. Going around the edge. Nice and slow. I like to start from top to bottom. Pulls out any air bubbles that I might have with a nice firm press on it. I feel just like pushing hard on it really just also helps in itself to remove some bubbles. And then I'm going to seal this bottom here real quick. And this one has quit on me. We're gonna bump it over to this one. I haven't used this turner in a very long time because it sits right above my workspace. So it doesn't really get a whole lot of attention. So we'll bump it one spot down. And I'm just going to keep dribbling it on there. Get all the sploogies out of the cup. Again, around the lip, around the top seam of the cup. Same thing around the bottom. And that, folks, is it for part 1 of how I apply cardstock onto my tumblers. I've got my torch here. I'm gonna hit it real quick. I'm going to assume most of you are fairly seasoned at this, and you know not to let your torch rest on your epoxy for any long period of time. But for those of you who are beginners, you don't want to burn your epoxy. You don't want to hold your torch on a certain spot for too long. It smells. It will reduce the smooth, nice, perfect texture that you're going to get on your cup. And that is essentially it, folks. Get you a little bit closer here. can see what we're working with. I mean, that is it in a nutshell. So we're gonna let this spin for as long as it takes to cure. Being as I keep my space, like I said, relatively warm, I try to do my best at keeping it around that, 70, 72 degree mark. But sometimes I let it get a little bit warmer. If I need to speed cure something, I'll crank up my heaters onto high, and I can get 8-hour epoxy cured in like 4 hours. Does that mean it's a good, hard, solid cure? No, not necessarily. So I would be careful as to adding another layer too soon. But I can have this set up, especially a thin layer, in, anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. And then at that point in time, I will hit it with my sanding block or my nail file, smooth down those edges, place my washi tape on the seam, and I'm gonna start messing with the bottom of my cup. So I will do a tutorial on how I do that once this cup has finished turning and it's fully cured, or cured enough to work with. And that's all I've got for today. So again, I used Decorum UV resin today to apply the seal, or the cardstock, to get a good tight seal on everything. I used my Gorilla super glue that I lost. Dries clear, dries fast, don't stick your finger to it. And I used my Dulex brand UV light 405 NM rechargeable. Links for those, for the UV and for the Dulex, both purchased off Amazon, will be in the description below. Where did I get my cardstock? Out of these giant books. You can go to Walmart, you can go to Hobby Lobby, you can go to Michael's, wherever you can go find cardstock, buy it there. This book right here that I'm flipping through came from Walmart. Is a slightly thinner cardstock, a little bit easier to work with. It's reversible, so there's 2 of each design, and there's a front and back. This I got from Michael's. It's a gold foiled watercolor. I've done a couple of cups with this, and they're beautiful. But it is a thicker cardstock, so it's a little bit more difficult to work with, just because you got to put a little bit more elbow grease into it. But overall, simple process. Usually, we're at 47 minutes now in this tutorial. Usually I can get one of these done in about 20, but being as I was talking you through it, walking you through it, showing everything, going super slow, it took a little bit more time. But these cups they're quick to do, quick to kick out. And if you want to do something a little bit different, don't have either a printer or don't have access to water slide, you've got this. You can cut them in designs, you can do all sorts of different cool stuff. You can cut it into strips, and just apply with your super glue, apply with Mod Podge. Again, Mod Podge takes a little bit longer, and if you do use Mod Podge, have a supply of rubber bands. You're gonna want to take and put this around your cardstock on your cup, holding those edges down nice and tight, for as long as it takes for your Mod Podge to get good and hard and set up and dried, holding that cardstock into place. So thanks everybody for jumping on and watching. I've got a ton of work to do, so I'm going to get back to it. And if you've got any questions, comments, feel free to either comment here on YouTube. I will post my Facebook page in the links as well. You can message me with any questions. I love helping crafters. I love crafting. It is my passion. So I like to help everybody out. This world is big enough for all of us to create beautiful things, and no need for competition and cattiness. So love, peace, and chicken grease, y'all, and I will talk to you guys later. Thanks for watching.